Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining Ontotext webinar today. I'm really excited to have our Chief Marketing Officer, Doug Kimball, and our Strategic Technology Director, Summit Paul, here with us today to talk about the learnings and highlights from the Gartner Data and Analytics Conference in Orlando. So I'm not sure if any of our audience was there to attend in person or just really looking to hear from us the insights from the conference, but I'll be asking Doug and Summit some questions, and we'll be going back and forth for maybe about 25 minutes until we leave some time for questions at the end. So if you do have questions, please go ahead and put those in the questions box, and if we have enough time, we'll dive into those at the end. But thanks again, Doug and Summit, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks. I'm excited.
Yeah, so we'll go ahead and dive in. While you two were at the Gartner conference along with some of our other teammates, I was actually at the HIMSS conference, and I heard a lot about data challenges, the market and how it's evolving, and of course, many conversations about AI and large language models. So since you guys were a part of the team there, and you heard, many talks, many things coming from analysts and presentations, it's going to be great to hear the insights that you all gathered. So Doug, why don't you go ahead and kick things off and give a little bit of info on your high level experience and what it felt like to be there on the floor and to join some of those sessions.
Sure. Well, to be there, it actually was very much enlightening and charged me up a bit. You always get excited to have that chance to just to hear what's going on, to see other vendors talking in the space, and the conversations from the people that came up to the booth. We had a lot of traffic. It was exciting. I think it's just always a bit of a boost to what it is we're doing. And you mentioned AI. Yeah, the AI was probably, if it wasn't on a booth, I was surprised. But we did that as well because it's an important part of what happens in the data management space. We had a lot of great conversations. It was a very well done event. I mean, Gartner always does a good job of capturing content, sharing it, bringing it back, keeping up with the trends. It's usually very high level, which is the kind of the audience that seems to be there. But I heard a lot about graph technology, heard a lot about knowledge graphs and semantics, definitely more than the previous two conferences I've been to, previous two or three now. It's just, you definitely have seen a change with that. The energy on the floor, the kinds of conversations we had with prospects coming up to us and saying, we want to talk about knowledge graphs, or we want to talk about large language models or AI, much more focused than we have had in the previous couple of conferences. So that was exciting. And I think just the interest in people coming directly to us as opposed to us trying to rope them in. I think our messaging on our booth certainly helped that, but the presentations from the Gartner analysts, the topics they were talking about, the way they were really steering a lot of things towards the importance of graph and relationships of data, that really seemed to get a lot of people very interested. So it was, I think worth our time to be there for one thing, but also just educational for myself and the rest of the team to be hearing the kinds of questions and puzzlement and how do you help to do these things. That really stood out to me a lot. So it was good.
That's great, and great to hear that there was a lot of questions and conversations specifically about graph technology. And I'm sure you guys got into the greater details of the value and the benefits that we bring. But Summit, I'm curious, with you being such an experienced data practitioner and not to mention a former Gartner analyst, for anyone who doesn't remember, Summit actually used to work for Gartner and was an analyst, which is awesome. I'm sure that you had a lot of conversations and a lot of times generative AI was brought up. So I'm curious if you could share a little bit more about those types of discussions and what Gartner is saying and where the opportunities are.
Sure. Thank you, Sam. Yes, we have heard about Gen AI, we have heard about graphs and metadata. And yeah, let me start by saying, the keynote itself highlighted the whole idea about bringing AI and humans together to generate value. And the Gartner is calling it something like collective intelligence. Now there is a lot of high expectations from data and analytics leaders as well as practitioners to deliver value now that Gen AI has come on the scene. And the goal here is to have a coordinated action plan, collaboration between AI and humans to solve really sticky problems, to optimize business outcomes. So I guess the next few years, I guess Gartner is envisaging it correctly, that is going to be an era of combined human and machine intelligence to create new opportunities. One of the major themes I also did here is from Gartner is to layer your AI services on top of knowledge-centric architectures, right? And Gartner has been, I was one of the first analysts at Gartner to write about graph technologies way back in 2019. I wrote about 3 documents in Gartner when I was there, and now they're building on top of them to really propagate the whole idea about why knowledge graphs are so important, and they are sort of the missing link, in my opinion, in most of the data architectures. The other thing I did here was to create a robust AI strategy, right, from planning to the execution, because it seems this decade is going to be the decade of Gen AI and knowledge graphs. And Gen AI will probably make or break industries and companies over the coming few years. So the goal is to build a formal generative AI strategy, identify use cases, the benefits, most importantly, the risks from a governance perspective, and align business and technology teams to support AI competencies. The other aspect I did here is to integrate the AI models with enterprise data to scale the Gen AI deployments. And enterprises, in my opinion, and also what Gartner says is, they must balance their AI ambitions with risk and cost tolerance. AI in certain cases will emerge as both the problem and solution for costs, because Gen AI is not going to be cheap, especially if you are going to hire AI engineers. Also, one notable thing that did strike me was Gartner saying that through 2025 or through 2026, at least 30 to 35% of Gen AI projects will be abandoned after POCs because of poor quality data, not enough risk guardrails in place, escalating costs, and also the fuzziness around identifying business value. And one of the things that Gartner repeatedly said is in deploying generative AI for wider enterprises, organizations need to instill robust engineering practices and again enable collaboration between humans and machines. Couple of things I did see was missing was more stress on data literacy, because in my opinion, again, bringing AI will solve certain problems, but in order to bring AI, the data personas have to be data literate. The term I did hear repeatedly was also around getting AI ready. And I did talk to a lot of people who did share my concerns as well, and they express the same concern: is what does AI ready mean, right? And in my opinion, it means 2 things. One is readiness from a data perspective, readiness from a technology perspective, and readiness from a people perspective, because upskilling has to happen for organizations to become AI ready. Today, we all do things like ETL or ELT, where we do extract, transform, and load. And I think that model needs to shift into something. I think industry has started using that word, and I discussed it with a few people there, I call it, or they're calling it as ECL, meaning extract, contextualize, and then load, because context is the most important thing, especially if you're going to become AI ready. So that's in short about what I thought I heard and sort of internalized from what Gartner was talking across different sessions about AI.
Very interesting. I mean, definitely a lot to take in. And to your point, a lot of people are probably wondering, what does getting AI ready mean, and how do I get AI ready? So this is really, really insightful. Doug, anything you would want to add from that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we heard a lot about was, large language models, Gen AI, getting ready for your large language model, and all those pieces. Heard a lot around that, and heard more, I think, as a result of that, around the concept of the questions around unstructured or even semi-structured data, because not obviously, but some people are realizing that in order to really properly have a large language model be implemented, you have to take and use all this unstructured data that an organization has. And we've talked about the explosion of unstructured data, which I think is really a poor term. We've had unstructured data for quite a long time. I think it's now more this awareness of, hey, we should be using all this unstructured data we have, text documents, emails, PDFs, log files, sensor data. There's a lot of different ways you can look at that. We need to use that in order to Sumit's point, get meaning and start to really drive that value. Because otherwise, you've got all this great information. You're trying to train your large language model, or even just validate it, make sure it's accurate. If you don't use the data that you've got out there, you're missing out on insights. And so that's one of the things that just really stood out to me, is the increased number of conversations where people said, do you guys do anything with documents? Do you do anything with unstructured data? They may not have always realized, that we're using those terminology. And that's where I think, and Sumit would agree, is where knowledge graphs become so powerful, because a large language model fundamentally is around creating connections, or finding and creating connections between the various data pieces that they go through. So it's looking at patterns and the connections between data sources. So the more data that you feed it, the better ability it has in order to make those connections, to provide more accurate answers, reduce hallucinations, and all those things. And knowledge graphs are ideally suited in order to provide that ability to connect the structured data and the unstructured and the semi-structured data, so that your large language model can be used more effectively, identify trends, etc. So it's funny to be excited about unstructured data, but it's such a, when 70 to 80 to 90%, depending which statistic you listen to, of all this data that's out there, and we keep creating more of it, is just not being used as much. I mean, the use cases become pretty amazing, whether it's a customer 360 approach of looking at emails, or looking at log files and help files, to supply chain activities where you're looking at shipping manifests or bill of materials to build things. Bringing all that data in order to make more effective decisions is a great use of unstructured data. So yeah, I feel a bit geeky, but I got excited hearing the kinds of comments around unstructured data.
Yeah, it's interesting that was something that stuck out to you, because I know we at the HIMSS booth, we had several conversations around similar things, and just interesting to see the parallels there. So going off of that summit, I know you talked with a number of chief data and analytics officers and IT leaders at the show. So I'm curious if you could share any takeaways from those conversations around data management needs. And with that, where do you see those discussions happening with Gartner? And is there anything that you feel is missing in those conversations as well?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Doug, and thank you, Sam. Yes, the CDO role is increasingly becoming central to an organization's success and failure, right? And the entire organization is looking to the CDAO role for successful data management and analytic practices, right? There are a lot of different types of roles now, right? The CDO, the Chief Data Officer, the Chief Data and Analytics Officer, which we call CDAO. And then there is also this new role coming up, which is CAIO, Chief AI Officer, right? So CDOs are sort of, CDAOs are, these kind of roles are becoming sort of indispensable in my opinion. And the theme that I got from a lot of the conversations is, data and analytics is becoming the heart and soul of most organizations, which means it's also becoming like a single point of failure, as we architects use single point of failure for the entire business. If these analytics and data management systems, which are powering so many downstream systems, go down, the entire organization goes down, right? Etisham, who did the keynote, also in one of his sessions mentioned that about 60 to 65% of DnA leaders involved in generative AI planning are of the opinion that educating leadership is one of their primary responsibilities in terms of what are the things necessary to create an AI vision, make your data, people, and technology AI ready. And for this, what I heard was also organizations need to be flexible. They need to reshuffle some of their operating models to facilitate autonomy, flexibility, and also have that cushion of failure, because not every AI endeavor within an organization is going to end up successfully. Extend data literacy, in my opinion, to include mastering or understanding AI capabilities with better skills, and allowing data democratization for capabilities within the organization. Building relationships, especially organizations that are at the leading edge of technology, they need to build relationships with some of the AI innovators in the space, and navigate the complexity by showing real business value. So those are the kind of things that I heard in terms of how the leadership is embracing AI capabilities. One of the things I also would mention is from a governance perspective, right? Some of the leaders, I think it was in one of the sessions that I could not attend, but I later saw that because I was very interested, was 60% of organizations, it's according to Gartner, 60% of the organizations will fail to realize the value of their AI use cases because of governance issues, right? And when we talk about governance, leadership becomes even more important because it involves, intellectual property, copyright issues. So I guess leadership has to be very literate going forward with a lot of the governance issues that are related to AI. So I hope that helps and answers some of the questions.
I wanted to top on that real quick, because you used one of the terms I heard and used also at Gartner is data democratization, and really that idea of we're doing all these data things in order to empower the users of an organization with more data, more information, in a fashion, the data products we talk about, in a fashion that helps them to do their job better. So that ability to increase efficiencies and democratize that data so that it becomes more widely accessible. I saw a lot of people nodding their heads. I talked to a couple of CDAOs that when you started talking that fashion is making that data more broadly usable, really got some good responses there. The other thing was around again going back to efficiencies was a big piece of that, is that those connections we talk about, that ability to create those higher level, for the LLMs to have that higher level task was a big thing. But what I had to make sure that I told some people was that this is not a rip and replace initiative. The reason I want to bring that up is that, well, I think it's one area where Gartner needs to do a better job of educating when they talk about some of these newer to people who are in the audience technologies, that like knowledge graphs. Some people were a little concerned. They came to talk to us. Well, I just bought all this. We're installed. Talking to this as a way to add to and improve your architecture, your systems is important. So this is not a rip and replace. And the reason I emphasize that is that we can just be seen as one more pain in the neck data initiative, but that's not the case. And you talked about this in the beginning. You get your data systems, get your data processes right to make this everything good. That stops that failure rate that we've talked about, and that's a big thing. And so data democratization stuck out to me. And again, you don't have to change your whole processes in order to install a knowledge graph. So, sorry, Sam, I just wanted to add that in there.
No, that's great. I was gonna ask if you had anything you wanted to chime in on after what Summit shared. So that's great.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, I know at the top of the webinar, I encouraged folks to throw some questions in the chat. So I would love to also remind folks, if you do have any questions, feel free to drop that in the questions box. And yeah, Summit and Doug, let's go ahead and get into some of these questions that came through.
Sure. Thank you.
All right, coming from Daniel Taylor. Did you get any sense whether those prospects were getting close to starting an actual internal projects as opposed to just starting the shop for 2025 and beyond?
All right, cool. Hey, Daniel, good to hear from you. I'll take mine, and Sumit, I'd like to. I know, Sumit, you grabbed a couple of people and just walked off with them in a good way. Um, all over the board. That would probably be the best answer. We had a couple of people who were quite upfront. I'm just understanding graph technology. One company said we're probably 18 months to 2 years before we implement it, which I tried to encourage them, not from a sales standpoint, but from a getting your business right standpoint. I would accelerate that. But several people talked to us that I spoke to that were, we are in the middle of evaluating technology for graph, for semantics, for knowledge graph, depending on the terminology they worked with. Some people had implemented some graph programs and they had not gone well, so they wanted to understand what it is that we did differently, how we scaled was a big piece of that. So I think it was kind of an all over the board, but in general, compared to roughly the same time last year, a lot more people were either farther along in the implementation of or the evaluation as opposed to what is knowledge graph. So Sumit, you did several hands-on demos. I'd love to hear your point of view too.
Yeah. I have definitely seen a lot more interest, a lot more awareness of graphs, especially knowledge graphs. And this sort of parallels with what Gartner has been saying all along, last about 3-4 years, is how transformative graph technologies are, especially if you look at the areas around Gartner stressing on working more with the metadata side of things, right? Metadata is becoming so big. It's often becoming bigger than your data sources in certain cases, right? If you think about supply chain, right? When you are drinking a cup of tea or any drink, you will be surprised to know how much of metadata is there when it comes to your hand by the time it reaches your hand from the producers, right? Metadata management is becoming very challenging, and knowledge graphs and graphs are a lot about metadata, how you capture the different interconnections around metadata. So yes, I did see a lot of interest in what knowledge graphs are, how matured they are, and a lot of the attendees also had the question about how do you make knowledge graphs easier from a learning perspective, from an adoption perspective. What does the end-to-end timeframes as well as the deployment or advocating knowledge graphs takes, from bringing in your data to creating the models to running analytics and then deploying it. Also, there was a lot of interest around how knowledge graphs and LLMs, as you know, Ontotext has done quite a lot of work in integrating LLMs with knowledge graphs, and a lot of the questions were around how knowledge graphs and LLMs sort of synergize, right? In terms of building ontologies, in terms of building knowledge graphs, or even doing natural language querying. We have capabilities like talk to your graph, which I was showing to a lot of the attendees, where you don't have to write complex knowledge graph Sparkle queries.
Great, thank you, Sumit. Awesome. We have, I think, time for a couple more questions. One question says, to what degree did attendees make the real connection between data principles, for example, identify and meeting resolution and business value, including AI? Is information literacy more than just lip service?
Somebody want to start that one?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the missing pieces for most organizations' data and analytics architecture is the contextual aspect. And this is not just me telling it because I come from a graph-centric, a graph database company. But if you look at organizations like data.world, where they are also saying where their data catalogs are powered by graph technologies, right? And they have seen that data catalogs by themselves really, yeah, it makes sense. But the goal is, how do you use a data catalog along with the context of your data to make the semantics much more visible from a data democratization perspective, from an information architecture perspective, right? That is where a lot of the organizations, as those of you who are watching are experienced data professionals, as you have seen, things like data modeling, which used to be a very core thing for a lot of data management practices, is slowly nosediving in terms of its popularity, which is not right, especially in today's world where there is so much of data, diverse data across heterogeneous data sets. So that's what my take is. Go ahead, Doug.
Not much to add other than, a lot of my conversations as I was doing kind of the education process, of these were, what are you trying to accomplish? What is it that you're wanting to do that basically that brought you to our booth in general, but brought you to the Gartner conference as well? What are they trying to accomplish, and understanding how we help them to potentially to measure that movement, that success, because just doing a data project for the fun of it does not usually work well. And so yeah, we try to get more of those conversations around what is the value you're looking to get out of all the information that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I think we probably have time for one more question. So this one is asking, what exactly is a knowledge graph and what is underneath it? I mean, is it built on top of NoSQL database or RDBMS?
So this is your world.
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. Knowledge graphs, you can build knowledge graphs on top of any database, but that really will not take you long, especially in large enterprises where there is so much of diverse data sets, structured, semi-structured, unstructured. Typically, the best knowledge graphs are built, when I say best, meaning the most useful knowledge graphs are built on top of RDF technologies, which come from web standards, which have standardization, which helps to create interoperability around the data sets, which helps you to disambiguate entities. Maybe you have customer database across different siloed databases across different departments. Their meanings are not all standardized. There is a lot of ambiguity in the meanings. A knowledge graph will help you to sort out and bring clarity to the meaning, disambiguate the entities, link the entities, and make the data that is across your data silos much more connected in a semantic way. Now, graphs are very intuitive. We use graphs and knowledge graphs every day. We don't realize it. When we use a search engine, you're using a knowledge graph. Results you see on the right-hand side when Google or any of the other search engines, you search for a particular set of strings, you get the result. That is a knowledge graph. And now we are moving away from a string-based search to a thing-based search, where things are concepts. The advantage of knowledge graphs is we are now conceptualizing things and bringing in that context and semantics. Knowledge graphs basically are sort of a knowledge model on top of your data stores. Ideally, those data stores should be graph-based data stores, and more so RDF-based data source. If you think about data fabric, all a data fabric is doing semantic data integration across your data silos, again with some machine learning algorithms, but most of the data fabrics are powered with knowledge graphs at their core. It's a long answer. We would love to connect with you, and I would love to educate you more on knowledge graphs, why they are so important, how they are built, on a separate call. Please reach out to us.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, I think we have a couple more questions, but we will reach out directly to answer those as we are coming up on time here. But thank you so much, everybody who joined today, and Doug and Summit, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and all the things you learned from this year's Gartner Data and Analytics Summit in Orlando. And just want to share with everybody that we will be sending the recording out, but as always, as Summit said, please reach out if any of these are things that you're either struggling with, or if you have more questions, we're happy to dive deeper into those discussions. And, you know, as always, we would love to have you follow us on LinkedIn to stay up to date with all of the content that we're pushing out and any new webinars and initiatives that are going on from Ontotext. So thank you again for your time and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.